Warning, this content may be upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. What is the strangest thing to have happened to you on a family vacation? When we visited Disney World for a vacation, we stayed in the Disney resorts that they had, and when we checked into our room, turns out a family was already staying there, and we asked them, "Why are you in our room?" They said that this is our room. We checked our room keys and turns out they are both the same. We went to front desk of why they were staying in our room, and the person helping us said they did not know why. Front desk called the supervisor or manager, I forgot who, and when he saw the family he said, "Wait a second, we kicked you guys out last month." Me and my family was confused. Then the family got escorted out of the hotel, and turns out the family were trespassing areas they weren't supposed to be in, and they stole the janitor's or maid keys to get a room. The hotel gave us the night for free from the trouble, and we had a good vacation after that and happy cake day up. We were in a campground on the bay, and my antisocial ass had zero interest in boating or jet skiing or whatever. What I was interested in was sitting at the end of a dock and reading my book. When I went to do just that, I passed a place where you could rent a crab pot for like $2, so I got one. I hauled my overflowing bucket of crab back to my parents, and they were all, "Oh, shit. We ate great that night." I got picked from the crowd to be slimed at Nickelodeon Studios. Early 90s, driving through upstate New York, somewhere around Syracuse. We had been on the road for a while, and my dad decided to pull into a truck stop so we could stretch our legs. It was just around sunset, so maybe 8:30 or 9 p.m. I had to go to the bathroom, so my dad gave me some cash for some snacks and I walked to the truck stop. I did my business and bought some snacks and started to walk back. I decided to take a slightly different path back to the car, so I walked along a more shaded, secluded area to one side of the parking lot that overlooked a small stream. Under some trees in the very far end of the lot, I passed near a car that was parked and running, an old brown Cadillac. I didn't give it much thought, although it did have one thing that struck me as odd. I got back to the car and my dad complained about what the hell took me so long. I told him about tossing some rocks in the water and that I saw an old car that had a weird thing I'd never seen before. He was absently munching on the chips I had brought while I explained that the Cadillac had a hose going from the exhaust pipe into one of the windows. I remember my dad's face as he turned to look at me, a barbecue chip falling from his mouth, half chewed. He stared right at me and asked me to repeat myself, as he was clearly only half paying attention to my ramblings about chucking rocks. I explained again that some Cadillac was running and had a rubber-looking hose going into one of the windows from the tailpipe. My dad's eyes got wide as saucers and he bolted out of the car before I had even finished the sentence. I stepped out to follow him and he shouted back in that angry dad voice to my mom to keep the damn kids in the car. I watched from the windows as my dad quickly ran to the other end of the parking lot where the Cadillac was parked. By then several people from the truck stop were also running towards the car, which was actually hidden from my view by a transport truck that had parked about halfway between the cars. I watched as fire trucks and an ambulance arrived to the truck stop, followed by police. It was fully dark by the time my dad came back to our car, the whole lot illuminated by flashing blue and red lights behind him. He didn't say anything and just started the car and drove in silence, shooting my mom quick gloss and shaking his head to my insistent questions about what was going on. It wasn't until many years later that I understood what I had seen. There was a short in the wiring for the car horn, so whenever we turned left, the horn went off. My dad got a lot of dirty looks from Woman Smile. A fuzzy caterpillar gave me some kind of rash/allergic reaction by committing suicide in my sock. No idea. After a small walk around a resort, I had to go to the hospital. For a caterpillar? Friends of ours in my small hometown are owners of a hotel there. So one year, my family is in town for Christmas. Long story short, they wanted someone to babysit the hotel for them while they fly south for a week. We had the place to ourselves. It was actually a pretty ballin' Christmas, opening gifts in a huge hotel lobby under a 12-foot tall tree, rooms to ourselves, etc. But one night I'm flicking through the cable. The movie network is on. There's nothing else to watch. I'm in the room alone. I can watch adult movies and nobody can stop me. I was a preteen at the time. What's the feature film that night? The Shining. I mean, what are the chances, right? I knew it from pop culture references, but had never seen it. Oh, and don't get me started on going to the bathroom, making sure the bathtub was empty. Otherwise, it was a great Christmas. I got locked inside Disney after it closed. My family went canoeing in the BWCA in Minnesota. Nobody had a great sense of direction, so we got lost AF and ended up on the other side of the border in Canada. My bikini top was pulled off by a large wave in the sea. I could not find it in the water because it was dark colored, and so I really panicked. I am very shy and modest and could not handle going out on the beach with no top and covering my bobs with my hands. Then something unbelievable happened. A long piece of seaweed got wrapped around my chest by another large wave, perfectly covering up my bobs. It was AF if Neptune had heard and answered my panicked prayers. I was on a Mexican cruise with my family when I was 13, and went to some scary movie night held for 12 to 17-year-olds. Some 16-year-old felt me up, tried to lure me back to his cabin, and then stalked me to my room even after I desperately tried to lose him so he wouldn't know where I stayed. I had to avoid him the entire trip and it ruined the vacation for me. Not as serious as the rest of these replies, but we accidentally walked into the clothing optional beach. My grandfather had developed pneumonia and we were bringing back from the hospital to our Airbnb. Cop cars go flying through the neighborhood but no lights on. I commented on how irresponsible that seemed in a neighborhood. All of a sudden my husband is rushing us into the house and locking everything up when we hear the helicopter coming. SWAT team was 2 houses down demanding the person come out, one thing after another. Saw a UFO. We were on vacation at a lakeside cabin type place, mid to late-ish 1980s, Finger Lakes in New York, the kind of place where everyone lit fires in fire rings on the lake beach and the sunburnt kids toasted marshmallows while the adults drank beers in Adirondack chairs together, even though none of the families had met before that day. And then I realized the moon was already up, and high overhead, but there was another very bright light rising to my right. Everyone got silent. We watched this glob of amorphous light rise in the distance over the lake. And then it turned into a spiraling shape that turned faster and faster, spiraling over the lake. And then disappeared, and then the power went out on both sides of the lake, and then people started yelling. Adults grabbed their kids. We all ran back into our cabins and locked the doors. Then the power came back on. The next morning, there was a report on local TV of an unexplained light in the sky, and that the local military installation had refused to comment. Many years later, I saw this news broadcast, and that's exactly what we'd seen. Still can't explain the sudden power failure. I called my parents to send them that video when I saw it, and they remembered it, corroborated every bit of my memory, but said, "Oh yeah, that was weird, right? And you and your brother were convinced we were all going to be abducted by aliens or wake up on Mars or something, and the news reports in the morning didn't help, did they?" Me and my mom were staying in a hotel room in Spain. My dad and brother were down the hall as the rooms could only fit 3 people in them. My mom liked to sleep with no top on as it was warm and she has no shame. I was about 13. At about 4 in the morning we hear fumbling at the door and the door starts to open. I managed to wake up and push the door shut. Through the peephole I could see a young guy. He kept looking at his key and trying again. He seemed quite drunk. After about 3 minutes he gave up and left. I ran down to reception with my mom and they explained that they had given him the key to our room as he told them that was his room. Turned out he had the correct room, but the wrong hotel. This'll be a hilarious story to anyone who cares to read it, and as a time frame, this was last December I believe, so we went to a small county/town in California to visit family, who were coincidentally the deputy and his family. So we go to the beach and my mom leans over to the deputy and says she thinks this dude is armed, to which he responds he'll watch just in case, until someone finds a pellet gun, a bag of weed, and the guy's identification hidden tucked away because he fled the scene from the CIA agent. I wish I was joking, but this retired bus driver brought in a possibly armed person with a sentence. When I was a kid my family rented a holiday house on the south coast, here in Australia. In the middle of the night a drunk guy broke into our house and started cooking sausages on the stove. He apparently claimed he'd got the wrong house. I woke up and heard the guy slurring his words, and my dad shouting at this guy and asking how he'd got in. But in the morning my parents told me it was just a big dog that had got in our backyard. They didn't want us kids to be scared for the rest of the holiday. They finally told the truth about the sausage cooking home invader when I was an adult. My daughter and I got our luggage in the trunk and the dog comfy in the back seat of our car. We drove about an hour and a half away for a beach vacation. Shortly after we got everything out of the car and into the house, our dog let out a little yelp, then collapsed on the couch, dead. That was last June. It still sucks. When I was 5 I broke 2 toes, because a drunken dwarf fell on me. It was literally a little person dressed as a dwarf from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. He was an actor at some amusement park we were visiting and apparently got hammered and fell down from a carnival ride platform I happened to stand next to. Somehow managed to fell on my foot in a way he broke my toes. I was OFC screaming bloody murder and my dad jumped the guy and gave him a right hook. Afterwards someone from the park administration came to our house with a big bag full of toys and carnival candy and stuff for me. Then my brother screamed bloody murder because I didn't want to share lol. My toes did not suffer any long-term dwarf damage, BTW. When I was about 14, my family and I were visiting my dad's hometown, which is a touristy and safe little beach town. My friend and I were walking down the sidewalk right beside the beach on a calm weekday when a tall, normal-looking man in a sharp and expensive suit ran up to us at full speed. He had a briefcase in one hand and a melting ice cream cone in the other. We later went to a fish and chips place and told the server our story. Apparently the guy had approached him as well. I think about this a lot because we were very obviously nerdy and childlike still. Went to New Mexico with family and some friends when I was really little. One day while walking through a market, we saw a palm reader. My friend and I got super excited and immediately begged our moms to let us do it. They agreed, and my friend went first. When my friend was done, I sat down and held out my hand, excitedly awaiting her readings. As soon as this lady grabbed my hand and looked at it, though, she frowned and furrowed her brow. And I knew I wasn't about to get the same kind of reading as my friend. Walked away from the reading feeling so uncomfortable and upset and haven't been to a palm reader since. Went to Jamaica with my family when I was 12. If you've ever been, you'll quickly see how pushy all the souvenir vendors are. The country's economy heavily relies on tourists, so it's understandable. But these people are uncomfortably persistent to get you into their shops to buy stuff. Anyway, this tall, skinny, Jamaican man comes up to us and insists that we follow him to his shop, so we started following him. But we kept walking a good 5 minutes and soon realized we were out of the tourist zone. We found ourselves in a sea of Jamaican locals, most of which looked like they were commuting to work. I just remember holding tightly to my mom, thinking how easily I could get lost amongst all of the people. The guy said something along the lines of, "Oh, it's just a little more walking." They looked at each other, and decided it was best that we noped the FCK out of there. Could have been nothing, but you never know. The whole situation was sketchy. Mind you, when we first entered the tourist zone by bus, I noticed that it was guarded by men with AK-47s. That alone was enough to freak me out. Drove to Mazatlan on a family vacation back in the 80s. When we got to our hotel, we were taking the elevator up to our room and all the walls were covered in blood. The hotel staff just brushed it off. Never did learn what that was about. My mom was really good at getting to know the locals wherever she traveled. A couple of days later, she and I were invited to a young girl's birthday party in town. We went, and a few minutes after we arrived there were SWAT-type police surrounding the house. We had to hide behind a couch for hours until they left. Never learned what that was about either. Knowing Spanish would have helped a lot. We were staying in some cabin-style townhouses in San Antonio which backed up against a green belt. As we were getting ready for bed, we heard a loud thump that sounded like it was coming from the wall, followed by scratching and screaming. We were understandably freaked out. Eventually we figured out that a possum had somehow gotten stuck in the space inside the wall. Luckily, they let us move to the unit next door. Was on a family reunion in MN and we stopped by this restaurant my uncle used to work at in high school. We celebrated my cousin's 3rd birthday there and she got stung by a bee. That restaurant was owned by my future husband's grandpa. I lived in Wyoming but could have crossed paths with my husband in my preteens while on a family reunion in Minnesota. I saw a zebra get effed by a giraffe. Nature reserves are effing weird. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.